Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into the world of data breaches. We're going to take a look at what industries are targeted most often, how these attacks actually happen, and where in the world they're happening.
And, it's a topic that impacts just about everyone, whether they realize it or not.
Absolutely. And to help us understand this better, we've got two fantastic data sets to work with.
Oh, yeah. Great resources for this.
One is from Information is Beautiful and covers some of the biggest breaches in the world.
Mm,
The other is Wikipedia's really comprehensive list of data breaches.
yeah.
So we're talking about incidents from all the way back in 2004 up to 2024.
Wow.
I think you'll be surprised by some of the things we find. For example, did you know that stolen credit card numbers on the dark web are shockingly cheap?
Yeah. It's amazing how the value of different data types has shifted over time.
Or that Europe has now actually overtaken North America in the number of reported data breaches.
That's right.
Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, the landscape of cyber threats is constantly evolving, and understanding these trends is critical for everyone.
Totally. Let's start with the industries that are in the crosshairs the most. Our data shows that web services are the #1 target, making up over 23% of all breaches. That's massive.
It is, and it's not hard to see why. Web services hold a treasure trove of valuable data. We're talking email addresses, passwords, browsing history, even financial information in some cases. It's a hacker's dream.
It's like one-stop shopping for cybercriminals. Compromise one service, and you potentially unlock access to a whole network of user data.
Exactly. And what makes web services particularly vulnerable is that there are often specific weaknesses in their systems. Things like insecure APIs or outdated software that hasn't been patched.
So it's like having a fortress, but with weak spots in the walls. No matter how strong some parts are, those weaknesses make the whole thing vulnerable.
Exactly. And those weaknesses are constantly being probed and exploited.
Okay, so web services are a prime target. What other sectors are we seeing heavily targeted?
Well, healthcare is another one, unfortunately. It accounts for about 14% of all breaches.
Healthcare. Really? I would think hospitals and clinics would be the first places that come to mind for hackers. What makes them so appealing?
Patient data.
Yeah.
Medical records, national ID numbers, insurance information. This data is incredibly sensitive and extremely valuable on the dark web.
So I guess in a way it's even more valuable than financial data because it's more difficult to change or replace. You can cancel a credit card, but you can't exactly change your medical history.
That's a great point.
Good.
And the fact that many healthcare institutions still rely on older systems and software makes them even more vulnerable. Systems that were implemented years ago and weren't designed with today's cybersecurity threats in mind.
Wow, it's kind of unsettling to think about the institutions we trust with our health being so vulnerable.
Yeah, it really highlights the need for better cybersecurity across all sectors, but especially those dealing with such sensitive information.
Okay, so you've got web services and healthcare. What other industries are in the crosshairs?
Well, not surprisingly, financial services are high on the list. They account for about 12% of breaches. Banks and other financial institutions are constantly under attack.
It's like the digital equivalent of robbing a bank, right?
Right.
Except instead of guns and masks, it's malware and phishing scams.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But what about governments? Did you know they're targets too?
they are.
Absolutely. Government sectors make up about 13% of all breaches.
Wow, I would have thought they'd have some of the tightest security. Why are they targeted so much?
It's a combination of factors. Some attacks are carried out by cybercriminals looking for citizen data that they can use for identity theft and fraud.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there's also something called state-sponsored actors. Essentially, these are hackers working for other governments, and they're often looking for sensitive information or trying to gain strategic access. Espionage is a big part of it.
So it's not just criminals, but governments themselves trying to get their hands on data. It really makes you think about who to trust in this digital age.
That's for sure. And it highlights the need for robust cybersecurity measures at all levels, from individuals to organizations to governments.
Absolutely. It seems like no sector is truly immune to these attacks. I mean, we've covered web services, healthcare, finance, and government. That's a pretty broad spectrum.
You're right, no sector is completely immune. But the impact of a breach can vary quite a bit depending on what kind of data is compromised.
Right, that makes sense. It's not just about the number of breaches, but also the severity of what's been exposed. So let's talk about the data itself. What kind of information are we talking about here?
Well, the most common type of data that gets compromised is personally identifiable information, or PII.
PII, that's things like our names, addresses, social security numbers, right? The stuff that really makes up our digital identities.
Exactly. And that kind of information is extremely valuable on the dark web.
Really? How valuable are we talking?
Well, imagine taking a peek into a dark web marketplace. Credit card details can go for as little as $10.
Wow, $10. That's
No.
less than I spend on my morning coffee. But why are credit card numbers so cheap compared to other data?
Well, think about it. Credit card details can be blocked or deactivated pretty quickly.
Right, so they're not as useful in the long run.
Exactly. But PII, on the other hand, that's the key to unlocking our entire digital lives. It can be used for identity theft, account takeovers, all sorts of malicious activities. And unlike a credit card, you can't just cancel your social security number.
So it's like PII is the real gold mine for these cyber criminals. They can use it to cause havoc in our lives for years.
Absolutely. And understanding how they get this information is the next piece of the puzzle. Let's move on to discussing the most commonly used tactics in these data breaches.
Okay, let's do it. What are we looking at here? Anything particularly surprising?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that good old-fashioned hacking is still the most prevalent attack method.
Really?
Wow.
Hacking? I thought those days were long gone. What about all the fancy new AI-powered attacks we hear about all the time?
While those new methods are certainly emerging, hacking still accounts for a whopping 69% of data breaches.
69%. Wow, that's a huge number. I guess hacking really is alive and well.
Uh,
So, what does hacking entail these days? Are we talking guys in hoodies typing furiously in dark rooms?
it's definitely more sophisticated than that. Hackers use a wide range of techniques, everything from exploiting software vulnerabilities to social engineering tactics. They're always finding ways to trick people into giving up their credentials.
Social engineering. So that's like those phishing emails where they pretend to be your bank or something, trying to get you to click on a bad link.
Exactly. Phishing is one of the most common social engineering tactics, but there are many others. Attackers are always coming up with creative ways to trick people into clicking on things they shouldn't, downloading infected files, or just revealing sensitive information.
It's amazing how they can make those phishing emails look so real. It seems like we all need to be more vigilant than ever. But let's get back to hacking. Can you tell me more about some of the specific techniques they use to break into systems?
Sure. One method that's becoming more common is the use of zero-day exploits.
Zero-day exploits. What are those?
Basically, a zero-day exploit is a vulnerability in software that's unknown to the people who made the software. It's like a secret backdoor that allows attackers to get in without being detected. And what makes them so dangerous is that, well, they're unknown, so there are no patches or defenses against them yet.
That sounds pretty terrifying. So these zero-day exploits, they're like ticking time bombs just waiting to go off.
That's a good way to put it.
Mm.
And they are highly sought after on the dark web, with some criminal organizations and even nation states willing to pay millions of dollars to get their hands on them.
Millions of dollars just for a software flaw? That's incredible. What makes them so valuable?
Because they offer a way to break into systems that would otherwise be incredibly difficult to penetrate. Imagine a full chain attack on a mobile device, where multiple layers of security are compromised, giving the attacker complete control. That kind of access can cost millions on the black market.
So they are like the ultimate weapon for these hackers. It's unsettling to think about these things being out there just waiting to be exploited. What other attack methods should we be aware of?
Well, believe it or not, poor security practices are another major contributor to data breaches. We're talking about things like using weak passwords, not updating software regularly, and a lack of basic security measures like firewalls.
That's surprising. I would have thought most companies would have the basics covered by now.
You would think so, but unfortunately, these simple oversights are still responsible for about 14% of breaches.
It really highlights the need for better security awareness and education, even for the basics.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at where these attacks are happening geographically. I think you'll find some interesting patterns here.
Okay, let's talk geography. Where are we seeing the most activity when it comes to data breaches?
Historically, North America has been the region with the most data breaches.
That makes sense. They were early adopters of technology and have a lot of large companies that are attractive targets.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part. In 2023, Europe actually overtook North America in terms of the number of reported breaches.
Wow, that's a big shift. Why do you think that happened?
Well, there are a few potential factors at play. One possibility is the rise of ransomware attacks, which have been a particularly big problem in Europe recently.
Ransomware, that's where they encrypt your data and then demand a ransom to get it back, right? I've been hearing a lot about those in the news lately.
Exactly. And as more European companies adopt cloud services, the potential attack surface expands, giving hackers more opportunities to strike. Plus, the implementation of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, has probably led to an increase in reported breaches as well.
GDPR, right. So maybe Europe isn't actually experiencing more breaches, but they're just better at reporting them now.
That could be part of it. It's hard to say for sure. What's clear is that the threat landscape is constantly shifting, and we need to be aware of the risks no matter where we are in the world.
That's a good point. So we've covered North America and Europe. What about other regions like Asia, Africa, and South America?
We're seeing data breaches increasing across the globe. Asia, in particular, has seen a significant increase in recent years, largely due to the rapid adoption of digital technologies there. For example, India experienced one of the largest data breaches ever with the Aadhaar breach, which exposed the personal data of over 1 billion citizens.
Wow, over a billion people affected by a single breach. That's staggering.
It really highlights the need for strong data protection laws and robust security practices, especially as more and more countries embrace the digital world.
What about Africa? Are they seeing a similar trend?
Africa has had relatively fewer breaches so far, but that doesn't mean they're immune. As more countries in Africa adopt digital technologies, they're likely to become more attractive targets for cybercriminals.
So it's just a matter of time before they catch up.
I wouldn't say that for sure, but it's certainly something to be aware of. The threat landscape is always evolving, and attackers are always looking for new opportunities.
It seems like it's a constant game of cat and mouse, with both sides always trying to stay one step ahead.
You could say that. Now, let's talk about a particularly concerning trend: the rise of state-sponsored attacks. These are attacks carried out by governments against other governments or organizations.
State-sponsored attacks. That sounds like something out of a spy movie. Is this really happening?
It's happening more than you might think. We've seen examples of state-sponsored actors targeting critical infrastructure, financial institutions, and even elections.
Wow. So it's not just about stealing data anymore. It's about disrupting services, sowing chaos, and even potentially influencing political outcomes. It sounds like this is something we need to explore in more detail.
Absolutely. It's a complex and evolving threat that we'll delve into more in the next part of our deep dive. We've been talking a lot about the big picture of data breaches, right?
Yeah, the trends, the different sectors affected.
But sometimes it's the specific examples that really capture the imagination.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's those crazy stories that make you realize just how creative and sometimes just plain strange these attacks can be.
Right. So get this. Back in 2013, a group of researchers figured out how to steal data from air-gapped computers.
Wait, air-gapped? You mean those computers that are completely isolated from the internet, like not connected at all?
Oh, yeah, those ones. The ones that are supposed to be super secure because they're not online.
So how in the world did they manage to steal data from a computer that's not even connected to the internet?
Well, they found a vulnerability in Adobe Reader, and get this, they were able to use the computer's sound card to transmit stolen data through radio waves.
No way! So they're using the computer speakers to send out stolen data.
It's as crazy as it sounds.
That is wild. That one definitely wins points for creativity. Got any other examples like that?
Oh, I've got a whole treasure trove of these. Remember that time a casino had their high roller database compromised?
Oh, yeah. I think I remember hearing about that one. What was it, like an inside job or something?
Nope, it was even stranger. They got in through a thermometer.
A thermometer, like one of those things you stick under your tongue?
Not quite. It was a thermometer in their lobby fish tank.
You're kidding me, right? A fish tank thermometer.
I'm totally serious. The thermometer was connected to the casino's network. It had weak security, so hackers used that as an entry point to get into the entire system.
So even something as seemingly harmless as a fish tank thermometer can be a security risk.
Anything connected to a network can be a potential target. Speaking of unexpected targets, there was that time when a vending machine company got hacked.
A vending machine company? What kind of data could they possibly want from a vending machine company?
Well, this wasn't about stealing data from the vending machines themselves. It was about using the company's network as a way to get into their payment systems. The hackers got access to customer credit card information that way.
Ah, so the vending machine company was just a stepping stone to something bigger.
Exactly. It shows how interconnected everything is these days, and how a breach in one place can have ripple effects across multiple organizations.
Okay, I gotta ask, do you have any more of these crazy data breach stories.
Oh, I've got one more up my sleeve. Have you ever heard of cryptojacking?
Cryptojacking. That sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. Refresh my memory.
Okay, well, it's where hackers use your computer to mine cryptocurrency without your knowledge.
So they're basically hijacking your computer's processing power to make money for themselves.
Exactly. And it can be really difficult to detect because it often doesn't cause any noticeable performance issues.
So how would I even know if my computer was being used for cryptojacking?
Well, one sign is if your computer is suddenly running hotter than usual, or if your CPU usage is really high. There are also software tools you can use to detect and prevent it.
Okay, I'll have to keep an eye out for that. So we've covered some pretty wild examples of data breaches, but let's get back to the human element we were talking about. I know a lot of people feel powerless when it comes to protecting their data, like it's all up to the big companies and governments to keep us safe.
It's easy to feel that way. But the truth is, we all have a role to play in protecting our own data and being aware of the risks.
So what can we do as individuals to stay safe online?
Well, for starters, using strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts is absolutely crucial.
I've been trying to do better with that. I finally started using a password manager, which has been a lifesaver.
That's a great step. Password managers are a fantastic way to generate and store those complex, unique passwords that we all need but can never remember. And if you can enable two-factor authentication on your accounts, definitely do it.
Two-factor authentication, is that where they send a code to your phone or email to verify your identity? I always find that a bit of a hassle, but I guess it's worth it for the extra security.
Absolutely. Think of it as having a security guard checking your ID before letting you in. It makes it much harder for hackers to get into your accounts, even if they've managed to get your password somehow.
Okay, so strong passwords and two-factor authentication. What else can we do?
Be very careful about the links you click and attachments you open, especially in emails. Phishing attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated, so it's easy to fall victim to a well-crafted scam.
Yeah, I know. I always try to hover over links before clicking on them to see if they look legitimate.
That's a good habit. You can also carefully examine the sender's email address to make sure it matches the organization they claim to be from. If something seems off, trust your instincts.
Right, like if you get an email from your bank asking for your account details, it's probably a scam.
Exactly. Legitimate organizations will never ask for that kind of sensitive information over email.
Okay, so we need to be cautious about suspicious links and emails. What else should we keep in mind?
It's always a good idea to regularly check your bank statements and credit card statements for any unusual activity. Early detection can really minimize the damage from a potential breach.
So it's about being proactive and vigilant with our financial accounts.
Right, and it's also important to keep your software up to date. Those updates often include important security patches that fix known vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I know those update notifications can be annoying, but I guess they're there for a reason.
They're definitely worth paying attention to. Think of them as strengthening the walls of your digital fortress.
I'm liking this analogy of a digital fortress. So we've got strong passwords, two-factor authentication, careful clicking, checking our statements, and keeping our software updated. What am I missing?
Oh, and one last thing. Backup, backup, backup.
You mean back up my important files?
Exactly. Make sure you regularly back up your files to an external hard drive or a secure cloud service. That way, if the worst happens and your computer crashes or gets hacked, you won't lose everything.
Great advice. It's like having an insurance policy for your digital life. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the things we can do as individuals to protect our data, but with all these breaches happening all the time, is there really any hope for the future? Is it even possible to stay ahead of the bad guys?
It's a valid question. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so it can feel overwhelming at times. But I do believe there's hope. There are some incredibly talented people working tirelessly to develop new security technologies and strategies.
So you're saying it's not a hopeless battle?
Definitely not.
Oh.
The key is to stay vigilant, stay informed about the latest threats, and adapt our defenses accordingly.
So it's all about being proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. And that's where education and awareness come in.
Like what we're doing right now, trying to help people understand the risks and how to protect themselves.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about these threats, the better equipped we are to defend against them.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a bit. We've been focusing a lot on the negative side of data, all the breaches and the attacks. But let's not forget that data can also be an incredible force for good in the world.
Absolutely. Data has the potential to do so much good, to drive innovation, solve problems, and improve our lives in countless ways.
I think sometimes we forget that in all the doom and gloom about data breaches.
It's easy to get caught up in the negative headlines, but when we look at the bigger picture, we see that data can be a powerful tool for positive change.
So it's not all bad news then.
Not at all. Think about all the incredible advances in healthcare, education, and scientific research that have been made possible through data analysis and insights.
Like personalized learning experiences for students, new treatments tailored to an individual's genetic makeup, even smart cities that use data to optimize traffic flow and energy consumption.
Exactly. Data is also playing a crucial role in tackling climate change by helping us understand environmental patterns and develop more sustainable solutions. It can revolutionize transportation systems, making them safer and more efficient.
It's really amazing to think about all the ways that data can be used to benefit humanity. It's this powerful tool that can be wielded for good or for bad, depending on the intentions of the user.
I like that analogy. And I think it's up to all of us, as individuals and as a society, to ensure that data is used responsibly and ethically.
That makes sense. But how do we strike that balance? How do we reap the benefits of data while minimizing the risks?
It's a complex question that we're going to be grappling with for a long time to come. But I believe it starts with a commitment to ethical data practices.
What does that look like in practice? What can companies and organizations do to make sure they are handling data ethically?
Well, transparency is a good place to start. Organizations need to be open and honest about how they collect, use, and share data. No more hiding behind confusing and convoluted privacy policies.
So no more fine print that nobody reads.
We can hope so. We need to move toward a model of data stewardship where organizations see themselves as responsible guardians of the data they collect, prioritizing data privacy and security just as much as they prioritize profits.
So it's about building trust and accountability with customers and users.
Absolutely. And it's also about making sure that data is used fairly and equitably. We need to be mindful of potential biases in data and work to mitigate those biases.
That's an important point. Data can often reflect and even amplify existing inequalities in society. If we're not careful, the algorithms that are increasingly shaping our lives could end up perpetuating those inequalities.
You're absolutely right. It's a complex issue, and there are no easy answers. But it's a conversation we need to be having, especially as AI and machine learning become more prevalent.
Right. These technologies are being trained on massive amounts of data, so if that data is biased, the results will be biased too.
Exactly. The decisions we make today about how we collect, use, and share data will have a ripple effect far into the future.
It's a lot to consider. But it's also exciting to think that we have the power to shape the future of data and ensure that it's used as a force for good.
It is an incredible opportunity and responsibility.
Are there any companies or organizations out there that are doing this well, that are really putting ethical data practices into action?
There are definitely some organizations that are leading the way when it comes to ethical data practices. Some are implementing privacy by design principles, where privacy is baked into the design of their products and services from the very beginning.
So it's not just an afterthought, it's a core part of their design process.
Exactly. We're also seeing organizations adopt data governance frameworks to manage data responsibly and ethically.
That's encouraging to hear. It sounds like progress is being made.
It's a gradual process, but we are seeing a growing awareness of the importance of ethical data practices, and consumers are demanding more transparency and control over their data.
Which is a good thing. Consumer pressure can really drive change. So, what do you think the future holds for data? Will it be a force for good, or will it just continue to be a source of constant anxiety about breaches and misuse?
I believe it has the potential to be both. It all depends on the choices we make as individuals, as organizations, and as a society. We need to be mindful of the risks, but also embrace the incredible opportunities that data presents.
It's a challenge and an opportunity all rolled into one.
Exactly. And as we've seen today, the world of data is full of surprises, both good and bad. It's a complex and ever-evolving landscape that demands that we keep learning, adapting, and challenging ourselves to think differently.
I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered so much ground today, from the technical details of data breaches to the broader philosophical questions about data ethics and its role in shaping our future.
We've explored the risks, the challenges, and the incredible potential that this data-driven age offers.
And we've emphasized the importance of being aware, being proactive, and being responsible in our interactions with data.
It's been a truly enlightening deep dive, and I hope our listeners have come away with a better understanding of this complex world of data and cybersecurity.
I do too. Now, before we wrap things up completely, I know you have one final thought for our listeners. Something to ponder as we move forward in this digital age.
We've talked a lot about the different threats to our data, the need for strong security practices, and the importance of ethical data use. But let's circle back to the human factor, the role that human behavior plays in all of this.
That's an interesting angle. What do you mean by the role of human behavior?
Well, as technology advances, it's becoming increasingly clear that human behavior is often the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain.
Yeah, we're all human. We make mistakes, we fall for scams, we can be tricked.
Exactly. And attackers are constantly refining their methods to exploit those human weaknesses.
So that begs the question, what can we do about it? How do we strengthen that human element of cybersecurity? How do we make ourselves less vulnerable to these attacks?
That's exactly the question we're going to tackle in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our data breach deep dive.
Part 3.
I'm really interested in something you mentioned before about human behavior being the weakest link in cybersecurity.
Yeah, well, we can build the most sophisticated security systems in the world.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it often comes down to human error. People make mistakes.
Absolutely. It's those mistakes and vulnerabilities that attackers are constantly trying to exploit.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about that human element, explore some of the most common mistakes people make that unintentionally put their data at risk, and most importantly, what we can do to protect ourselves.
Sounds good. I'm ready to learn how to be a better digital citizen. What are some of those common mistakes people make?
Well, we talked about it before, but it's worth repeating. Using weak passwords, still a huge problem.
I know. We all do it. We try to pick passwords that are easy to remember, which unfortunately also makes them easy to guess.
Right. And another big one is using the same password for multiple accounts. I mean, if one account gets compromised, they're all vulnerable.
It's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office. Not a good idea.
Exactly. And then there's falling for phishing scams.
Ugh, phishing scams. Those things are everywhere.
And they're getting more and more sophisticated.
It's so easy to accidentally click on a bad link or open a dangerous attachment, especially when they look so convincing.
Right. They play on our trust and our natural tendency to want to help.
So how do we protect ourselves from these phishing scams? Any tips?
Education is key, being aware of the tactics they use. Look closely at the sender's email address. Be suspicious of any emails creating a sense of urgency. And never, ever give out your personal information over email.
Yeah, if something feels off, it probably is.
Exactly. Trust your gut.
Okay, so passwords, phishing scams. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Well, social engineering is a big one. It's a way of manipulating people into giving up personal information.
So they're like psychologically hacking people.
Exactly. They use tactics like playing on your emotions, pretending to be an authority figure, anything to get you to let your guard down.
So it's not just about technology, it's about understanding human psychology.
Right. And it can be very effective.
So how can we protect ourselves from these social engineering attacks? What are some red flags we should be aware of?
Be wary of anyone who asks for your personal information, especially if it's unsolicited. No legitimate organization will ever ask for your passwords or bank details over the phone or email.
So if someone calls claiming to be from your bank and asks for your account number,
Hang up immediately. And call the bank back yourself using the number on their official website to verify their identity.
that's a good point. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
And never feel pressured to make a decision on the spot. If something feels off, take your time, do your research, and ask questions.
It's all about thinking critically and not letting our emotions get the better of us.
Right. Okay, so we've talked a lot about individual responsibility, but organizations have a huge role to play in all of this too.
They do. They have a responsibility to protect our data. So what can companies do to step up their game?
Well, for starters, strong security measures are a must. I'm talking about firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and strong organizational policies about how data is accessed and handled.
So it's a combination of technology and good old-fashioned common sense.
Exactly. They also need to build a strong security culture within the organization. Every employee needs to understand the importance of cybersecurity.
Oh, it's not just the IT department's problem.
Everyone has a role to play, and that includes regular security awareness training for all employees.
Keep everyone updated on the latest threats and best practices.
Right. And they need to encourage open communication so people feel comfortable reporting anything suspicious without fear of getting in trouble.
That makes sense. It's better to catch something early on than try to sweep it under the rug and hope it goes away.
Exactly. Now, even with the best security measures in place, breaches can still happen. So organizations need to have a clear plan for what to do when that happens.
A plan of attack when things go wrong.
Exactly. A well-defined incident response plan.
So figure out how to contain the breach, investigate what happened, and recover from the attack.
Yes, and just as important, be transparent with your customers.
Yeah.
Let them know what happened and what steps you're taking to protect their data.
Transparency builds trust.
Exactly. Now, I know we've touched on this before, but with AI becoming more and more prevalent, organizations need to be thinking about the security implications.
Yeah, AI is a powerful tool. But like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Right. Attackers are already using AI to make their attacks more sophisticated, but AI can also be a powerful tool for defense.
It's a double-edged sword then.
It is. But the organizations that embrace AI for security purposes will be the ones that stay ahead of the game. They'll be able to detect and respond to threats more effectively, analyze vast amounts of data, and automate security tasks.
It sounds like AI is going to play a huge role in the future of cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Now, I know this has been a lot of information to digest. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. From the technical details of data breaches and attack methods to the very human element of security and the important role organizations play in protecting our data.
We've explored the risks, the challenges, but also the incredible opportunities this digital age presents.
And we've stressed how important it is to be aware, to be proactive, and to be responsible.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about these threats, the better equipped we are to defend against them.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for guiding us through this fascinating and sometimes a bit scary world of data and cybersecurity. I've learned a lot today.
Me too.
And to our listeners, we hope you feel more informed and empowered to navigate this complex digital landscape. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe out there.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.